You wake up feeling already behind. You sit at your desk staring at a screen, unable to execute basic tasks. You look at your partner and feel a hollow disconnect. And beneath it all is a quiet, persistent hum, the belief that you are failing at being a functioning human. We are told that happiness is a reachable destination. The societal expectation is that if we work hard enough and find the right partner, we will arrive at a permanent state of contentment that finally ends our psychological pain. The reality is that happiness is highly inconstant. It is fleeting, and the vast majority of long-term relationships fail to sustain that promised contentment. This academic paper highlights a phenomenon called self-contraction, the shrinking of positive personality traits as a consequence of entering a close relationship. Researchers also track self-adulteration, an active increase in negative qualities. The relationship itself can generate new toxic behaviors. These unseen psychological shifts operate beneath your conscious awareness. They lock you into a stagnant, negative loop, forcing you to remain deeply committed to a dynamic that actively erodes your sense of self. The persistent feeling of failure is the result of a predictable biological trap, one triggered when societal demands for permanence collide with a brain evolutionarily designed for change. This is Dr. Paul Ekman. His research explores the biological mechanisms behind why we feel what we feel, mapping the way the human brain processes universal emotions. Our brains rely on a rapid-fire threat detection system known as automatic appraisal. The moment we sense an event impacting our welfare, this appraisal system evaluates the data and triggers an instant psychological and physical change. These responses are entirely unbidden. You do not consciously choose to experience an emotion. It is an automatic occurrence that simply happens to you. This automatic system triggers biological responses in mere milliseconds. It is designed to work at a speed that completely bypasses the slower, conscious architecture of your brain. Anger, fear, sadness, disgust, surprise, contempt, and enjoyment all operate on this exact, uncontrollable timeline. This biological hijacking overrides everything else. It transcends regional boundaries, cultural conditioning, and individual intelligence. Because your conscious mind must spend its energy rationalizing millions of these split-second events it did not choose, it eventually runs out of the resources required for actual agency. This is the biological root of your executive paralysis. To understand why we stay trapped, we have to look at the physical duration of these affective states. There is a critical difference between a fleeting emotion and a lingering mood. This timeline illustrates the divergence. An emotion peaks and decays rapidly, typically vanishing in a matter of seconds or minutes. A mood, however, stretches out relentlessly, lasting for hours or even days. Moods are notoriously opaque. Because they are drawn out over such long periods, we are almost never aware of the specific trigger that actually initiated the mood state. This opacity carries a severe biological consequence. A prolonged mood drastically lowers your neurological threshold. It primes your nervous system to trigger intense, related negative emotions with a fraction of the usual provocation. Because we cannot see the original trigger that set off the mood, we mistakenly internalize these continuous, overblown negative reactions as conscious character flaws. We blame ourselves, completely missing the invisible biological priming driving our behavior. When you place two people inside a long-term romantic relationship, both operating with these lowered, highly volatile emotional thresholds, you create a catastrophic feedback loop. This primed state heavily exacerbates insecure attachment styles. Individuals exhibiting anxious or avoidant traits find their coping mechanisms pushed to the breaking point by the continuous, unbidden mood swings of their partner. We can see the statistical proof of this decay here in Table 4. The data shows a direct negative correlation between self-contraction, avoidant attachment, and a person's level of commitment. As positive qualities shrink, the desire to maintain the relationship deteriorates. Yet humans remain deeply conflicted. Even as their positive qualities compound into decay, they remain neurologically desperate to invest in the partnership, terrified of the alternative. This is the ultimate biological trap. We possess a conscious desperation for relational permanence, and it is constantly at war with an unbidden mood system that guarantees impermanence and self-destruction. Our profound lack of internal emotional awareness ensures we remain completely blind to the opaque moods controlling our major life decisions. But we are no longer the only ones watching. Emotion AI and affective computing are rapidly evolving as external, non-human systems designed to observe the biological data we ignore. These machine learning systems track facial recognition, vocal tone inflection, and shifting bioelectrics to instantly decode your unbidden emotional states in real time. While you struggle to identify the trigger of your own mood, these AI systems are perfectly positioned to recognize your lowered emotional threshold. They can subtly nudge and manipulate your hijacked brain to serve their own programmed objectives. Until we recognize the illusion of our own autonomy, we will remain trapped, not just by our internal biology, but by the external algorithms built specifically to exploit our executive paralysis. Clinical, measured. The system has entered a state of advanced allostatic overload. The biological hardware has collapsed, fully depleted of its reserves. The collapse follows a precise mathematical trajectory dictated by the software currently governing the hardware. We can identify this program as the false engine. It is a relentless, compulsive drive designed to generate continuous productivity and forced positive emotion. This drive forces extreme artificial forward momentum to mask a hollow center. There is no structural foundation behind the movement. Constant optimization represents a severe neurotic obsession, deviating from a healthy baseline of human functioning. When the system perceives stillness as a threat, it triggers a catastrophic survival mechanism. This burnout reveals the mind engineering its own biological destruction to escape the existential vacuum, a trauma response performed at the expense of the body. Inquisitive, we must examine the psychological origin to understand why the mind relies on such a friction-heavy apparatus. The Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl established that the absence of underlying meaning is the primary catalyst for psychological crisis. Without a coherent structural meaning, the psyche substitutes high-velocity sensation to fill the void, often manifesting as extreme productivity. Contrast this panic with the Stoic concept of Apatheia, a state of serene clarity and freedom from impulsive, wild passions. Without Apatheia, the mind cannot navigate a lack of direction. It simply accelerates in a panic, mistaking speed for an actual destination. The sensation of productivity was an illusion, the frantic pacing of a trapped animal trying to outrun its own existential crisis. The chase for productivity powers the false engine by weaponizing the brain's internal error detection systems. Clinical research by Dr. Iris Mouse reveals that valuing and pursuing happiness as a primary goal correlates with increased depressive symptoms. This behavior triggers hypersurveillance, where the brain constantly evaluates emotional output and speed. Treating happiness as a constant target alters processing protocols, making self-evaluation invasive. Human emotion is naturally unstable. Under this protocol, normal physiological dips are flagged as critical system errors. The brain flags these unmet emotional goals as failures, immediately triggering stress pathways to correct the perceived deficit. Optimizing for constant positive emotion structurally guarantees emotional instability by treating normal biological variance as a threat. Hedonic well-being relies on pleasure and speed, whereas eudaimonic well-being rests on contribution and purpose. Hedonic velocity requires constant escalating friction to maintain, whereas eudaimonic structure provides stable coherence. To correct perceived errors, the mind demands faster movement, creating an exhausting closed loop. This relentless self-monitoring forces the mind inward, preventing actual, present engagement with the work or life itself. This loop drives the nervous system toward a guaranteed catastrophic meltdown. The drive for forward momentum acts as the mechanism dismantling the biological system. Stability requires a missing architectural foundation, meaning. Viktor Frankl's experience in the concentration camps proved that meaning makes survival possible, even in extreme suffering. Meaning is structurally distinct from happiness. It asks whether an action matters, not whether it feels good. A meaningful life still contains emotional pain, but that pain becomes structurally integrated rather than disruptive. The false engine lacks this durability. It vibrates itself to pieces when confronted with unavoidable friction. This is why individuals prioritizing meaning report feeling calmer. Their emotional life is anchored, even if it is volatile. Without this structural coherence, the psyche is forced to rely on the destructive friction of speed to stay afloat. The subject often views their exhaustion as a permanent failure of their ability to sustain momentum. Burnout reveals the structural void hidden beneath the engine's movement. The engine was never grounded. It was suspended over a terrifying infinite abyss of meaninglessness that was actively avoided. Frankl argued that happiness and success cannot be pursued directly. They must ensue as unintended side effects of dedication to a cause. The biological shutdown functions as a forced physiological intervention, ending a runaway response to preserve the remaining hardware. Exhaustion strips away pathological momentum, leaving the subject alone in the dark with the exact existential question they spent their life running from.
Through the mechanisms of experiential avoidance and counterfactual thinking, we spend immense psychological energy demanding that the past change. We treat the mind as a problem that must be solved before we can live. This constant mental resistance dictates the trajectory of our behavior. We run from outcomes we cannot alter, leaving us perpetually exhausted. This exhaustion is rooted in the belief of the self as content, the assumption that our core identity is entirely defined by our transient anxieties, our social roles, and our past failures. By identifying so closely with the specific events of our lives, we force ourselves into an unwinnable conflict. Every regret or mistake is internalized as a structural flaw in our character that must somehow be fixed. We analyze our psychological state as if searching for the correct mathematical proof that will finally yield peace of mind. Yet every attempt to untangle the history of our actions only introduces more variables. The self as content functions as a psychological prison. Because the prisoner is also the architect, we lock ourselves into a cycle of permanent dissatisfaction. Albert Camus defined this friction as the absurd, the violent collision between our desperate need for meaning and a universe that remains completely indifferent. Rather than confront this silence, modern culture demands pathological happiness. We are pressured to project continuous optimism and productivity, regardless of our actual material or mental circumstances. Consider the standard corporate email greeting. I hope this message finds you well. It is a reflex, an empty formality placed over a void of genuine concern. These conversational reflexes function as stock phrases for the soul. They allow us to simulate empathy while carefully avoiding the discomfort of true human interaction or suffering. By applying this forced, artificial meaning over a meaningless interaction, we generate a form-letter existence that lacks any real weight. This performative happiness operates as the ultimate distraction. It shields us from the clinical reality of the absurd, ensuring we never achieve true lucidity about our condition. Clinical psychology offers a direct response to this condition through radical acceptance, a deliberate choice to stop fighting the maze of our own thoughts. This requires shifting to self as context. Here, the self is merely the observer, rather than the turbulent thoughts. From this vantage point, a traumatic memory loses its structural authority. It can be observed with the neutral detachment of a resting stone. This practice, called cognitive diffusion, unhooks our awareness from internal narratives, exposing the raw reality beneath them. It parallels the Taoist concept of genuine pretending. A person can fully participate in daily roles, like an employee, a romantic partner, or a citizen, without letting temporary labels dictate their ultimate value. By relocating our identity from the content of our minds to the context that holds it, we strip our internal struggles of their destructive power. Camus' essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, outlines how a clear awareness of reality gives life value, focusing on the moment the king watches his boulder roll down. This descent represents consciousness and revolt. Walking back down becomes the ultimate moment of absurd freedom. In this lucid state, the burden loses its metaphysical terror.
The rock becomes just a physical thing, a mechanical process without a master. Faced with this same void, many intellectuals attempt what Camus called the suicide of thought. Philosophers like Karl Jaspers reached the limits of logic and chose to leap into religious or abstract comforts to escape the silence. Sisyphus refuses that leap. He remains fully conscious of his fate, ensuring he is never undermined by the repetitive, mechanical nature of his punishment. Total control is located in the return to the plane. In that silent hour of consciousness, the laborer proves stronger than the labor. Accepting that the universe is silent might seem to invite an apathy where action feels pointless. Yet clinical observation identifies the autotelic personality. These are individuals who find deep engagement in highly challenging activities entirely for their own sake, rather than an external reward. By abandoning the pressure of a hypothetical future, all attentional resources are freed up to be invested directly into the unfolding present. Creation becomes the most honest response we can offer. To cast a work of art into the utterly silent void is an act performed with as little inherent purpose as the void itself. As these acts of creation reverberate outward, they reach other lost creatures, providing a temporary ration of meaning to someone else navigating the silence. The duty of happiness is not an obligation to feel joy. It is the duty to remain conscious and creative, even when effort serves no higher goal. Happiness, defined clinically, is apatheia, a state of serene equanimity and strict detachment from outcomes. Camus' ethics of revolt requires a person to maintain a constant tension between their demand for reason and the irrational reality they inhabit. This defiance relies on three certainties: a crushing fate, rejecting resignation, and the absolute refusal of hope. To fully accept the absurd is to drain everything to the bitter end, utilizing the entirety of the present moment without demanding that those experiences last forever. The individual completes a permanent transformation from a slave of a masterless universe into the absolute master of their days. The burden is his own, his mind is clear, and we must imagine Sisyphus happy, because in the absolute and total absence of hope, there is simply no further room for despair.